Okay, I'm just going to show you quickly how to composite an element from one landscape image onto another. So the idea is that we're going to take this foreground cliff here and stick it in this image. But it's not just a simple case of cutting it out and then copying and pasting it. We also have to make it match this image tonally. So we're going to cover how to do that as well. So what I can do, probably the easiest way, is pick up the selection brush tool here. I'm going to increase the width a little bit to about 140 pixels, and then we want to just click drag over this foreground cliff gradually to select it. Generally it will snap to the edges it's supposed to, but some of these are a little indistinct, the edges that is, and some of them require a smaller brush size. So I'll just reduce the width right down using the keyboard shortcut. And then sometimes we might need to remove areas from the selection where the edge detection hasn't quite snapped to the right place. So we can switch to subtract mode on the context toolbar, or we can also hold the Alt or Option key to remove from the selection, and then we can just add that little bit back in there. Okay, so as I move across the image, I just need to fine-tune the selection slightly. So again, smaller brush width just to select these trickier areas up here. And the selection brush is also somewhat velocity based, so the faster you move your mouse, the greater the selection tolerance. So that's just some advice to take it slow when you're doing selections in finer detail. Okay, we don't want to select this background aspect here, so I'll hold Alt or Option to remove it. Of course, there isn't really any hard edge detail here to speak of, so this one is always going to be a bit tricky, but we'll do our best. Okay, so that's my selection created. Next, I'm going to add a mask layer, and that will mask out the background. So we're just left with the element we want to composite, which is great. So then, I want to go to Select and Deselect, and what I'm going to do is select the entire background pixel layer and copy it. Now the reason I do this is for a non-destructive workflow. So we're copying across all that original image data plus the mask so that we can then go in and tweak the mask later if we need to. So I'll go to Edit, Paste, and then to quickly reposition this, I'll select the Move tool here and just move it to the bottom of the image. We can also turn on snapping, which is this red magnet icon up here, to make sure it snaps directly to the edges of the other image. Okay, great. So now we need to make this match tonally. So what we're going to do is add some adjustment layers, like an HSL adjustment, and we're going to nest them into the composite layer. So all we do is click drag until we get this blue vertical bar here, and then drop the HSL adjustment into the background pixel layer. So I'm going to knock the saturation down slightly because we're dealing with quite a dull, hazy image here in the background. And additionally, I'm also going to add a brightness and contrast adjustment, which I will also nest into that composite layer. And let's have a look here. We might want to reduce the contrast, perhaps leave the brightness where it is. So if you're struggling to make tonal matches, another great technique is to look at the individual channels. So across on the channels panel here, I can click Composite Red to get a representation of the red channel in grayscale. I can do the same for green and blue. And we can see here that on the blue channel, this composite layer is too contrasty compared to the image underneath it. And so to manipulate these channels individually, one way of doing this is to add a curves adjustment. So I'll go ahead and add a curves adjustment, and then I'll nest it into the background pixel layer. So then what I want to do next is select blue from the channel drop down here, and then I can just grab the bottom node and bring it up until the contrast begins to match a little more. We also need to do this for the other channels, so I'll move across to green here, and I'll also click composite green. This channel seems to be mostly okay, but it could do with a little less contrast in the shadow tones just to make it match. Then we'll move across to the red channel and also make sure we select composite red. And we appear to be more or less bang on with the red channel, but I'll just bring that up a notch as well. Now, bearing in mind this is not a foolproof solution, when we click the reset button to get all of our channels back, you really have to use your eye as the final determining factor as to whether you need any more tweaking with this. For example, I might not be happy with the green tone, so I'll bring that down slightly. But overall, if I just hide the curves adjustment, we've been able to use the curves adjustment to tweak the channels separately and get a better match by looking at the red, green and blue channels individually. So the idea behind this tonal matching is that you match one layer to the other, and then you do your final tonal adjustments on top of all those composite layers. So for example, now that I've matched this to this, I can say add a curves adjustment, and on top of that I might also add an HSL adjustment, just to bring a bit of colour and life back into the image. And then of course I might go back in and tweak the curves because I feel the image is slightly too bright. But let me just show you the effect of not doing the tonal matching. As you can see, this looks completely different and wildly out of place compared to our background. Whereas with tonal matching, it begins to look a bit more plausible. Now then, as a final step, I'll just zoom in, and you'll notice that we did just a basic selection with the selection brush. So upon closer examination, these edges are a bit too jagged. Now there is a really quick way to easily fix this. We can simply right-click the mask and choose Refine Mask. Now refining performs a degree of matting just by default, so even without tweaking anything, we can just click Apply and we'll have a softer mask edge to the image. And then you'll notice that the refine selection kind of knocked out a bit of the detail here. So another useful technique when you're compositing is, say I wanted to bring this back in, so I'll switch across to white, like so. Even a soft round brush is going to make it difficult to get exactly the right looking result. So instead, I'll just undo that step. If I go across to brushes and go to texture, I have a brush here which is like a randomized texture brush. And instead, if I go ahead and just paint that in, and then I switch across to black and just paint those areas out, we get a much more realistic blend that better matches the sort of the craggy edge and nature of this composite. So there we go, just a couple of techniques for you to try when it comes to compositing landscape elements together. I hope you found that useful, and if you have any questions or queries, please do ask on the Affinity forums. And don't forget to check out the other video tutorials. Thank you for watching.